Hey there guys, it's Stephen Gates from myplctraining.com with another video to help you become a confident PLC programmer. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to one of Rockwell's newer PLC programming platforms, and particularly the software involved with this platform, and that is called Connected Components Workbench, sometimes shortened with CCW. So this is the software used to program Rockwell's Micro 800 control systems. So they have the Micro 810, the Micro 820, 830, and so on controllers. And before we get started, I wanted to let you know about a free cheat sheet I have where I'll show you the 3 things you need to know to understand any PLC system. So if you're interested in that, be sure to click the link below so I can send you that free cheat sheet. It'll take you to a landing page, and I'm going to ask you for your email address if you would like the cheat sheet. So, back to the training. The Micro 800 controllers are still pretty new, and the programming software Connected Components Workbench is actually a lot different than software for the other Rockwell PLCs and PACs. In my opinion, this is kind of a bummer since it's always a pain to learn a new or a different programming software interface. But the good news is that it's really not that complicated, and the software is free from Rockwell. At least the basic version is, which is great for those who are trying to learn to program PLCs on their own. Also, for some people who are not familiar with Rockwell PLCs and maybe who have done Automation Direct or something similar, Connected Components Workbench might be easier for you than, say, RSLogix 5000. So, if you're looking for training on the more traditional PLC programming software from Rockwell, I'd encourage you to check out this free training I did for programming MicroLogix controllers. It's a free mini course, and so that will be linked below in the description. So here we go. We are in Connected Components Workbench Standard Edition. So the first thing we want to do to create a new project from scratch, so we'll choose from the file, choose new, and the project name, we'll just call it My PLC Training Demo December. Then click Create. Okay, so now we want to add a device. And so we are going to choose from the Micro 820 folder, just for the sake of this demonstration. And why don't we choose the 20 AWBR, and then click Add to Project, or Select, and then Add to Project. And it's creating the project controller. Okay, now we can see the controller we have chosen, and this is pretty cool because you can click around on the controller to do different things. So if we select the general menu item, we can see that we can actually give the controller a name. Let's call it My PLC Training _ Micro 820. The only thing we will do in the configuration before creating some logic is to set up the Ethernet IP address. So let's go to Ethernet, and then we will configure IP address settings. So we're going to make this a static IP address. So let's just make it 10.10.10.2. And then we'll make the subnet mask the standard 255.255.255.0. And we don't need a gateway address right now, so we'll leave that blank. Great. Now our controller properties are configured. Now let's set up a basic program by right-clicking Programs here. And we'll add a new ladder diagram. Okay, so right away it adds a program called Prog1 or Program 1, and under it it adds local variables. So that's what would be the equivalent, if you're familiar with Studio 5000, That would basically be the equivalent of the program scope tags. The local variables are just like program scope tags. Alright, so let's open up the logic editor and see how it works. So we double click the program 1 and it opens up the editor for program 1. So immediately we can see that it's quite a bit different than RS Logix 500 or even Studio 5000 Logix Designer. So here's our first rung, and it's in here by default. If we want to add some ladder logic instructions, we look over here to the right, the Toolbox tab, and we have some common instructions for ladder logic. You can add a rung, you can add direct coil, reset coil, direct contact, reverse contact, and so on. So they don't call their instructions even the same thing as what they would be called in previous or other Rockwell software, which again is kind of frustrating, but it's just, it helps you get familiar with other PLC brands by doing this. So direct contact would be the equivalent of an XIC. As you can see, it looks like a normally open contact. You can just drag and drop. So I've dragged it and I dropped it there. Now immediately it brings up the variable selector. So this is like your tag list. So what tag do you want to assign to this contact? And we don't have any tags or addresses set up yet. But let's go ahead and add one of the discrete inputs from the controller, the built-in discrete inputs, to assign to this direct contact instruction. So let's look down here. We have IO, EM, DO, 00, 01, 02, so on. And then we get to the DIs. So I happen to know that DO stands for discrete output and DI stands for discrete input. So we want a discrete input for sure. So let's choose 00. So I'll just double click that and it assigns that to our direct contact, which is great. Okay, so now let's add an OTE, which is not called OTE in this software. It's called direct coil. So let's just add that. And again, it pops up the variable selector. So this time we will choose one of our discrete outputs. And so we'll choose this first one, IO, EM, DO for discrete output 00. Double click that. And there's our first very basic rung of logic, a direct coil, or I'm sorry, a direct contact driving a direct coil, also known as an XIC driving a OTE. And so from there, you can see that it's very similar to ladder logic in other Rockwell software or other PLCs. Pretty straightforward. So let's say we want to be more descriptive about what these I/O points do. So we can assign alias names similar to Studio 5000. So let's go to the global variables folder. This is basically the equivalent of the controller tags in Studio 5000. So this output DO00, we're using that. So let's assign a name to that so it's easier to know what it's doing. We'll say this is a system control light. So system control manual light. So it tells us when the system control switch is in manual. And the discrete input is actually the system control switch being in auto. So if we go back to our program, we'll actually change these. So this would be system control manual light, and this be system global variables, system Okay, so we're going to use the system control switch auto alias, which is our discrete input 0, 0. We're going to use that as our XIC. Except we really need to make this an XIO, or as we call it in here, reverse contact, because let's just do that first and then I'll explain it. We do that because this is a manual light. So if we want the auto switch to control when the manual light turns on and off, then we need, whenever we're in auto, the manual switch light is off, and whenever we're not in auto, then that's when we turn on the light. Alright, so that's the basics of setting up your ladder logic program. Obviously, there's a lot more we could do with other types of coils, pointers, so on. There are other instructions as well. You can use timers and so on, but we won't get into that right now. We'll just stick with this basic program. And before we end this tutorial, let me quickly show you how to get this program downloaded to a Micro 820 controller. So there's a couple different ways to do this, but first we need to compile or verify the project. And we can do that by using this button that's called build, so builds the project. This is kind of like a verify. Build started. Project controller. It's going through the process here. Build 1 succeeded, 0 failed, 0 up to date, 0 skipped. So that is good news. So we're in good shape. Now let's go ahead and choose download. So we right click the controller and we click download. And now we see something that's familiar. This is similar to Studio 5000 Logix Designer and the other RS Logic software. We get a connection browser similar to RS Who, and we can see the different drivers we've installed in RS Links, and we can choose our controller from one of these drivers to download to. And I do not have a Micro 820 to download to today, so you'll just have to use your imagination about what you would do from here. You would choose your controller, click OK, and follow the prompts to download the project. So pretty simple. So there you go. That's an introduction to Connected Components Workbench. Obviously there's a ton more you can do with it, but that's a good start for those who are somewhat familiar with other PLC programming software. Be sure to download this free software from Rockwell's website and play around with it, and I think you'll see that even though it's quite a bit different than RS Logic software, that it's really not too difficult to learn. So if you like this training and you're interested in becoming a confident PLC programmer, I definitely encourage you to check out my free cheat sheet called 3 Things You Need to Know to Understand Any PLC System. So if you're interested in that, be sure to click the link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.